Hi, friends. Hello, the world. Welcome back to this random live on Monday. I'm your host, Stella Monova, and today I want to talk about the mismatch of front end and back end. Now that I feel like our lives involve around technology a lot, and we tend to talk about front end and back end, and I was thinking how that's so matching to our lives, especially when our actions matching our intentions or intentions not matching our actions. In other words, we say things even though we don't really mean what we're saying. And this type of problems keep coming up, especially in job interviews or work relationships. So I will give you a couple of examples of how that's happening and why that's a problem and what to do with it, right? So this is really the topic that I have been coaching a lot, especially around job interview simulations that we've been doing. I see this a lot coming up. So the job interview simulations, when we do, the mismatch of front end and back end happening is when we come to the interview, we say all the things that we believe we should be saying, even though in the back end, so in the front end, right, we're saying all those things, the answering the questions, giving the experiences, less like giving the lessons learned, all the ways that we know how to do it, we're so doing it, saying it, but the back end is not really on board with us, right? So back end meaning our intentions, our energy, our belief, our conviction is not really with us, and therefore we're just saying things for the sake of saying it. And what happens when we do that is that we're not really convinced ourselves that what we're saying is exactly what needs to be said in that moment, or we don't really mean that, right? We just say things, and possibly also, of course, giving ourselves slack that possibly we have been doing this for so many times that it just feels like this is something that we do, right? So when back in the day when I used to work with refugees, I used to do interviews a lot of the times, and the interviews would be about determining whether someone is a refugee or not, right? And I remember thinking that some of the interviews that we had done with those asylum seekers were so many times, I think maybe like, I don't know, five, six times, which would be so many in my eyes at the time, that after doing it several times, the story that they kept telling, it just feels like they're just saying it for the sake of saying it because I have asked them to, right? And they don't really like all the emotions behind them, the energy behind those stories are already gone because they just kept saying this so many times because we kept asking them so many times over and over again, right? So that's why when I talk about mismatches, this is really the mismatch is where we are saying those words, the words coming out and in structured way, in nice way, whichever the way, but the energy behind it, the conviction behind it, the belief behind it, trust behind it, the confidence behind it is a bit shaky or not really the way that we want it to be. And when this keeps happening is when we just keep feeling like we're just going to interviews after interviews, excuse me, nothing is happening. We just should be like selected, but we're not going to be selected. We're not going to get the job anyway, right? Because we don't really believe that it's going to happen. Um, we don't really believe that they're genuinely doing this interview so to select us. So therefore, we just keep doing it, and then it feels like a waste of time. It feels energy is just like going into draining energy, and we just go home feeling like it was another one of those things and nothing is going to change, right? So this is where we then get so frustrated, disappointed, and drained that we don't want to do this type of interviews anymore. And it's very understandable, right? Because we love doing things if we really believe makes sense, right? So therefore, we need to start understanding and seeing how or whether our words that we're saying and the intentions behind them, uh, the energy behind them coming through the same way, or they're just lagging behind or shaky or not really on board, and we're just saying things. Another example that of the mismatch of front end and back end, I would call it, is when we do this at work environment where I have a client who was telling me that her new supervisor said, well, I'm not a micromanager. I don't micromanage. I just trust people all the time and they do things because they're amazing professionals and all of this. And then whenever she writes the letter to the government, to other partners, and then she sends for the approval, so to say, right, or go ahead and do that, and then she sits down and spends probably several hours looking at every comma and points and all of this without really um, sharing any concrete or substantial change, and therefore it delays everything and it doesn't really match what she's saying, the boss is saying, which is that she's not a micromanager, right? So in my client's eye, her manager is a micromanager. So you can see that whatever we say, then our actions don't match. Our even though like maybe sometimes the intentions of this is what we mean, but we say it in a different way. Those when those things don't match, then the problems start happening, right? And there could be so many other examples of this that we just experience at workplace, we experience an interview, and then we keep suffering from how we keep, like, for instance, the very common example is we keep being very nice to people, or especially to people who we really don't like or who we really get triggered by. We try to be very nice, and then inside we're really like hating on them. We're bitching about them the whole time to other people. We are thinking about them the whole time outside of work. But when we come to them and then when we talk to them, we just talk and smile as if nothing happened. And that's also when the mismatch of front end of how we are showing our face and how we are greeting them, how we're talking to them versus how we're actually feeling about them, and they don't match. Now, when this happens, we tend to believe that no one really knows, right? We tend to believe that if I'm really hating on them or on that person, but I'm very smiling on the outside and I'm not doing anything, I'm not saying anything, they are not going to really know this because I am good at hiding everything and I'm good at not really showing everything, right? And I think that's where many of us are wrong to believe that. And this is especially true when it comes to interview process, is that we tend to see through who is just doing it for the sake of bragging. And like a client of mine was saying that we know it so well when someone is just taking one small thing and making it into a big elephant achievement, even though we can see through that that's not the case, right? So we're humans are so good at seeing through when this mismatch is happening, right? When the front end, the back end are not matching, we can really feel it, even if maybe we're not able to articulate it, we're not able to say this, or we're not able to accuse someone and say, I mean, come on, do you really believe that we're going to buy that story, right? For instance, maybe we're not able to do that because we have no evidence to confirm that. But what we are able to do is we're able to sense it. We're able to feel that there's something not right, and therefore we're also able to then use other words maybe to say that this person is not really up for this job or whatever it is, right? So we may then explain in different ways how this person is not really cutting and going to, this person is not the best candidate for this job, kind of thing. And we may explain in different ways. Now, when this type of mismatch happening is, we tend to then see this mismatch as, oh, they already had someone, so therefore I'm not going to even try hard to show up in the interview, right? Or I wasn't really a good fit, so therefore why bother even showing up the way I want to, or the way that I could have done. And then we just keep relying on those observations without really looking at, okay, where is that mismatch happening and why it's happening, right? So why is it happening? So if we take the interview scenario, for instance, if we see that the words that we're saying of the experiences that we're talking about, but the conviction behind is missing, right? So I'm just saying things in, even if, let's say, I say it in structured way, I say it in logical ways and all of this, but the conviction behind is missing, it just becomes like any other statement that someone has said. Do you know that I think the popular example that everyone can relate to is that you go to a, let's say, reception or ceremony of some sort, and then someone comes out, and then they just, looks at their notes, and then they read out, right? And then they read out, and then they do this, and then they read out, and then everyone claps their hands, and then, like, and while that person is doing it, we already checked out, right? We're not paying attention to them. We already, like, know, we even feel like, oh my God, it's going to be so boring. It has to be done. This is just, we have to do it. We're just going to listen, and then we're just going to clap, or we're just going to react in a way that's appropriate, and then that's the end of it, right? So this is where the mismatch is happening. And when that mismatch is happening in the job interview, however, is that it can be so detrimental to our own success, right? And if we come to the job interview convinced that we're not going to get the job, we're not going to be selected because they already have someone, because even if I'm great, they're not going to choose, then the mismatch is going to happen. Then we're going to say things, and then the behind the energy is not going to back us up. And therefore, we're just going to be monotonous, or we're just going to say the things for the sake of saying. Now, imagine if we actually showed up to the interview with so much conviction of, even if maybe we don't really believe that we are the best candidate for this job, let's say that that's a stretch for us, but at least we are so convinced that we want to do that job, and here are the ways that we could do that job, and we would explain that in the way that makes sense to us and makes sense to them, and say it with so much energy and conviction and intentions of all of the things that we want are coming out of us without even articulating them, then how that interview process will be different, right? How it will be different than we just say things for the sake of saying. The same way, imagine if the mismatch at workplace, where, like, using my client's example, where her boss said, I'm not the micromanager, or at least I try not to be, but if I am, please let me know, and I can, do my best not to do that. And if you notice me, like, accidentally micromanaging you, I really don't mean it. It might be just a habit. And if you let me know, then I, like, learn from it and correct myself. And if that really happened, and then my client would have been, of course, delighted to say in such situations, hey, boss, you said that I should point out to you when you are, uh, you know, getting into the micromanaging, and it seems like that's what's happening. Would you say that? And that would be a different conversation, right? That would be a different conversation where we see that, oh, what we're intending or what we're desiring is one thing, but our actions or our behaviors are showing something else. And then if we're open to someone else pointing out to us, and we're like, oh, shoot, that's not how I intended. I actually want to learn not to be a micromanager, because I know when someone does that to me, I feel so frustrated, right? And I don't want to do this to anyone else. And if someone points it out to me, then I'm happy to learn. That would be a very different conversation, right? So, or when we see someone on stage in a ceremony or a reception, whatever it is, and we say this from the genuine place of, this is what I'm observing, or this is what we're seeing, and this is what the problems are, and here are the solutions that we could all contribute, and how could we do that? right? And I'm not the only one who can solve it. Obviously, we all need to do that together. So how can we do that? If we do that in that genuine way, then likelihood of other people listening and wanting to be part of and doing something about it is higher, right? So that's why I really want us to think about how and where, excuse me, this mismatch might be occurring currently, where our words that we're saying we are saying it without really meaning them. We're saying it without really standing behind them. We're saying it without really having all of our conviction and energy behind them, how and where it's happening, and how to stop this from happening, right? How to stop this mismatch from happening. So if we come to the interview example, then we would be owning our truth of why we are at the job interview, right? So we're obviously delighted that they invited us to the job interview. There's also the part of us who's probably suspecting that what if they already have someone in, we might just be doing this for the formality's sake. And even if that's the case, coming back to this feeling of no, but I want to show up the great professional that I am outside of this interview process, right? Because outside of this interview process, I already know what I'm doing, or I already have learned so much and I'm wanting to do this job. And therefore, let me show all the best ways that how I could do that, and then let them decide, and not to be attached to the outcome, but rather say, okay, I want to do my best at least to show them why I could be a great candidate for this, and then let them decide. Maybe things happen. Maybe miracles happen. Maybe magic happens. Maybe they don't have anyone. Maybe they, even if they do, they would still choose me. Who knows, right? We don't know. So therefore, how can we show up in the way that we are matching our intentions, our energy, right? We are matching our convictions. Because a lot of the times people tell me how to sell your expertise or your skills because it's hard and all of these things. And we tend to get so much in our heads. But instead of thinking about, wait a minute, how could I genuinely, honestly, and with well intentions show up in the interview, leaving my entitlements and my suspicions, my frustrations to the side, right? And showing up to the interview, showing my professional self that I know so well. And I want to be this professional who shows up in the job interview where whatever I say, I mean it. And whatever the things that I'm saying, I'm convinced by it because that's what I really believe in. And I want to do this job because I believe in. And if I don't, then maybe it's best even not to apply for it, because it would feel like I'm lying to myself, right? Then maybe it's best that I find something else to do, or I find other ways to do the things that I really am convinced by. Because as long as we're not really matching our intentions and our what we're saying, and if we don't mean it, then this will be sniffed through by other humans. This will be come across by other humans as, we're just doing this for the sake of doing it, right? And if we keep doing that, then it will not be enjoyable for ourselves or other people, and we just feel like we're wasting time. And that's why, if we're not going to waste time, if we're not going to drain ourselves, if we're not going to pretend, or if we're not going to just do things for the sake of doing it, then we need to learn to mean it, and we need to have the energy behind that supports and um, like creates additional weight to our words. And that's when this comes across the way that we want to. And the same goes for when the mismatch is happening at work, in work relationship with other people. As long as we keep uh, being nice to their faces but hating on them inside, then obviously we're not going to feel good about ourselves, about them, and then we just keep poisoning ourselves with those emotions that we don't even want to have, and especially we don't want to have because of those people, right? And that's when we need to start matching our intentions or matching whatever is going on within us to the thing that we're saying. Either we decide not to be nice to the other person because that would be honest, right? Doesn't mean just because we're not nice doesn't mean that now we need to be rude to them and we need to be aggressive to them or whatever. We can also be very professional and say, I don't need to like this person, but also I don't need to bitch about that person or hate on them on the back, because that's really going to poison me. And therefore, I'm going to be true to myself to say, okay, this type of person is not my person. I interact and work with that person in the work environment because I'm a professional. But outside of this, I don't need to anymore indulge or grow my hatred towards that person or keep thinking about that person, because if we keep doing that, we're going to make that person even more powerful than ourselves, and then we just keep feeling like we're a victim of these hatred and complaining and all the things that are going wrong at work, right? So therefore, I really wanted us to use or have this awareness of where this mismatch might be happening and how we can own our truths about it and decide what to do with them. In the same way, if the truth around interview process is that, well, they already have someone, or I'm not good at this, I'm not good at that, then, and if we feel like that's our truth, then we also need to ask ourselves, okay, what are we going to do with our truth? Because if we come to the interview and just showing and saying all the things, even though we're not feeling it, then we just keep feeling dreadful as we do that. And the more we feel dreadful, we're not even going to want to apply for that job or let alone get that job, right? And indirectly, we're really saying we don't want that job because I'm already dreading doing this thing. And then maybe if that's the case and we don't even want to get that job, then maybe we should really be honest with ourselves and say, no, I don't want that job. I want something else. Okay, let's transition to something else. Then it would be a lot more honest to ourselves and to the other people, right? So that's why, my dears, I really want us to be aware of how and where this mismatch is happening and where we are not really owning our truth and also deciding on our truth and what to do with that truth instead of coming to the job interview or to the work relationship with all of this emotions of either hating it and keep doing it anyway, which makes us feel so bad, or not doing it at all, which would be very honest, right? Or if we're going to do that anyway, then how to clear up all the back end emotional, negative emotions that we have, how to clean that up so that they don't influence us and they don't give the energy to what we're saying in the negative way, and how we can do that. And that's the topic that I'm really inviting you to work with me on, especially in this group coaching environment where we are discussing about how to transition successfully, as well as how to get promotions, how to enter the humanitarian sector, how to become international, or how to get to the next level, right? We're discussing all of this, but we're most importantly discussing how can we match the front end and the back end, the front end being the things that we say, the way we behave, and then the back end being all the energy emotions behind it that's either support or contradicts, and how to clarify that so that we are speaking as one. We are speaking from genuine, authentic, loving place, and not from hatred, suspicion, disappointment, frustration, and then that those emotions just coming through our words, and that's really what we're not wanting. So come to work with me on this, and I will explain to you even more in detail in the group coaching. And I'm inviting you to do this before 29th of August so that you can get the chance of coaching with me individually for 1 month as well, where we dig deep into how you really feel aligned, so you no longer have these mismatches. Okay, my dear.